All right, this has been an interesting yet long day already, and I'm going to try to shorten things up a little bit here because this is what we do. We try to do things a little bit faster and shorter. So thank you very much for the invitation, Jim and T.
Thank you.
It's a pleasure to be here. You can see on my screen when I get this other thing minimized,
Alrighty.
that our goal is to simplify neuromodulation to expand markets, and I will get to that more towards the end of the presentation. Where do we start? We're starting with the focus from our company. We're focusing on back and neck pain because I'm not going to have to explain all the great details about it, but it is a very large market that affects a lot of people, and chances are high every one of us has already had, currently has, or will at some point in our lives have back pain. That's because we're sitting right now and not standing. I think a big contribution to that. That's as much as I'm going to say to set things up. The problem with back pain is that when it does get a little bit worse, or a lot worse, I should say, it does take a while to fix or mitigate, especially the more intense cases. Specifically, what you see here is the typical timeline for a patient. From pain onset, for about 3 months, they try to take care of that themselves with ibuprofen, maybe sitting up straighter and walking better and kettlebell exercise. Then they go to their pain physician, and the pain physician will try a couple of drugs that they can prescribe. Eventually, once the pain physician says, oh, this might be a disc issue, I'm going to give you a referral to a pain physician who will try to help you realigning this. The pain physician will start a couple things, and those include the entire list that I don't think I need to read out to you because you can see that in front of you. Biggest items there are physiotherapy, general rehab, and at some point, even interventions such as spinal fusion. Now, all of that costs money, and I average about $8,000 a year. Insurance companies tend to see patients switch from insurance company to insurance company on average, so the 50% patient, every 3 years. That means if the insurance company waits for 5 years before they give you the prior authorization, there's a good chance the next insurance company has to pay for it. And this is exactly why they will try first as minimally invasive as possible, and then with raising interventions to try to pass you on to the next insurance company if possible. But that also means the patient doesn't get treated. And that means that if you look at this graph, that is from the paper Impact of Wait Times, before you actually do get spinal cord stimulation, the overall success rate goes down the longer we wait because we do get a neurological component to it, neuropathic pain. And in the 5.5-year category, you basically lose the chance to help about 30% to 50% of the potential patients that you could really have an impact with. So what we should try to do is not treat this late and actually move all these patients up earlier. Now, I just mentioned why this is not so easy to achieve because it's very expensive to get there. So it's kind of a chicken and egg problem. And I could say we're the fox in the hen house, but we're not trying to we're not trying to get around the problem this way. So basically, our approach is from a needs statement perspective, looking at this, we basically said we need a faster way to find who is a good responder. And secondly, we need to have a good way to verify if that responder is a true responder, or if in fact the physician tells the patient, oh, this seems to work really well for you because I want to give you the permanent implant. Let's face it, that happens, unfortunately. And we need to give the clinician better data so they have a cleaner way to evaluate a true patient responder from a placebo responder. It would also be great if there is a non-IPG option, because there's a lot of patients who don't actually want to have the surgery to place an implantable pulse form generator or short IPG. And having an IPG option is great because then you can partner with those who are producing IPGs, the Abbotts, Medtronics, Nevros, Boston Scientifics, Biotronics, yada, yada, Great Batch, and so on. So how do we get there? I showed you where we are today. That is the graph from earlier. If I click one more time, we're switching to date for where we can see this happen tomorrow. And with tomorrow, I really mean very close to tomorrow, because if you design the technology to be as simple and minimally invasive as possible, as we believe we're on, you can potentially do a clinical trial with this year, even though we're only 5 years old. To explain to you where we're going with this is we have developed a needle injectable device. I'll show you a picture of that in a second. It's truly micro-invasive in comparison to minimal invasive because we're smaller. And not only can we place it through a needle, we even developed ways that we can reach it with a needle and pull it out through that needle at the end if we want to take it out. So we have a completely implanted system to get connections down to a deep tissue location, such as the DRG, or we can go more shallow, as pointed out with Anuj as the earlier speaker, that PTN is a potential target, stereotibial nerve on the heel, and place our device under ultrasound guidance fluoroscopy, leave it in for 30 days, verify that the patient is a responder, and then we're developing this via label extension to be either a 5-year placement timeline, and patients can stimulate with that, or to pull it out if the patient doesn't want it anymore. So it gets us as close to a stimulation on demand using a TENS-like device as it is currently. If you have a pain, you take an aspirin kind of setup. In addition to the TENS-like interface, we do have the option to connect an IPG to that, because we realized that some patients, after using a TENS-like approach to stimulate, might want to have the option to forget about their condition. They might want to not have to worry about the pain anymore and putting a TENS unit on that completely implanted system. So we needed to have a simple adapter that can connect us to an IPG. So we built this into the system as well. Now I've spoken a lot about what this can be. This is how this looks. Fundamentally, it is a wire structure that you can see in the lower left. And it once you inject that, it forms an anchor that is wider than the needle that is actually placing it. So we basically self-anchor us out of a needle. Think about it as my index finger is the needle, the injector pops out of the needle and forms a ball of wire, so to say. And this ball of wire functions like an anchor so that you can then pull the needle back and place a second ball of wire right at the skin, but below the skin. And now you can use this connection from just underneath the skin down to the nerve, in this case, the DRG, to electrically stimulate the DRG with a TENS unit out from outside of the skin. That's the basic premise that we developed. If you go back in history, we started this with injectable biocompatible glue that had to have the same properties. So we basically now do everything with wire. You might ask, why did you do this? Because everybody from the clinician side we talk to asks, how do you take it out? Well, now I can tell you, we stick a needle next to it, have a little hook come out, hook to it, and pull it out through the needle at this point. It's incredibly elegant. Our clinicians love it. One of the clinicians that we're working with happens to be the current president of ACIP, the American Society for Interventional Pain Physicians, Amol Soy. We work with a couple others, but he has truly recognized the value of this. When it does take about 20 to 30 minutes to place a DRG lead the conventional way with the Abbott device, we come in and can do this in 2 to 3 minutes. So there's your 10x basically. And clinicians take about 5 minutes to train, maybe 15 minutes to train to get there. That far that we've met with a couple of potential partners, bigger players. We're talking to them. And we are meeting with them usually towards headquarters to then have them with their clinicians place our device into a human cadaver, test it out on specific locations that they're interested in. And what I've seen at this point is it takes about half an hour for them to get really acquainted with it. After that, they want to start playing with it, putting it different locations, different angles, whatever, which is indicative of clinician adoption within 30 minutes of getting used to the technology. This is not a little research toy. This is at this point something that's coming in a package. Full setup that you would assume to have as a final product in the clinic. No, we're not FDA approved. We're not approved by any regulatory body at this point. We are working towards our first clinical trial with this version of the device. And Just to give you a little bit of a market opportunity, about 1 million steroid injection patients receive steroid injections per year. About 250,000 of those, meaning 1/4, are non-responders. Those are the steroid injections just in back and neck pain. So 250,000 of those are non-responders. Of those, after about 5 years, 83,000, or about 1/3, receive IPGs from Medtronic, Abbott, Boston, Nevro, et cetera, meaning the other 2/3, that's your sore thumb sticking out, or two sore thumbs, kind of sticking down, are non-responders to the other treatment and don't get an IPG. So there's a ton of potential market available that could, if you come in right after a steroid injection with a device like that, be qualified as potential responders. And this is basically our path to market. So we're looking at this as tripling the entire market size that is currently commanded by Medtronic, Abbott, Nevro, and Boston. So where this will go from a value proposition from our perspective is earlier clinical utility, which means the patient is the first to benefit from this because they will receive an earlier treatment right now and without surgery. Again, no cutting, no scalpel, and no suture to get the device in. No cutting, no suture to get the device out. That is the vision that we're working on, and we have animal data for. Physicians, they can do more in a shorter period of time than with current technologies. I've told you there's about a factor of 10 in between, 10x from a time perspective, which is, I think, rather interesting. And I don't think I have to read out all the other points here to just get the point across that we believe this technology can change the way how neuromod is being done, coming in significantly earlier and actually helping patients. And I've listed a couple of the players a couple of times. I've called them out, and others, not just the big players, that have recognized the value of using this as a potential early trial lead that could then be connected to their own IPG. Basically repurposing their already existing IPGs with one additional change. And that is, they right now put a trial lead in that comes out of the body. So it gets dirty in 7 days. Which means right now you pull the trial lead out to put your permanent lead in, which is fundamentally looking like the trial lead to the body from a size perspective. We don't cross the skin, we're completely inside. So you don't need to pull our trial lead out, you can just connect to it. And that saves the clinician time. But for the patient, it means it's a lead that's less likely to piston around and dislocate. So the whole issue of lead migration, together with our anchor structure and not pulling something out that's actually in the right spot, put something in and hope that you're in the right spot, is a huge benefit that we can see. Quick summary of up-to-date status. So we were founded in 2017. We reached clinical stage in 2020 with a device as an NSR classification. We have been ISO certified, ISO 13485 with our quality system in 2020, recertified since then, and got MEDSAP actually, so the international version of ISO, around the Pacific in 2022. We have a lot of data to back up the claims that I'm making here in preclinical and clinical histopath, as well as a lot of preclinical data. And we believe what we're developing is 510(k) capable in the US, might not even need clinical data for Canada, and in order to get a first class 2 approval. And the sky's the limit because that's where we're going. So big picture, we're still relatively young. We have 5 angels that have brought us to where we are right now. We're raising a $3 million round. Over half of that round has been currently claimed by those 5, just over half. We're about to close out the round because we've gotten a little bit of interest from additional folks that came in through some of those angels. But the plan is to continue on the convertible note, and we can talk about cap and discount over a glass of water or something else later. Thank you very much.